What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Karnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammack. Daniel, we've made it through our Power 4 conference previews, ending now this week with the SEC preview for 2025, getting through the 16 teams. And look, you and I grew up in the Southeast. This is not the one we're most excited for. You know, look, your average college football fan, I love all of college football, right? But your average college football fan's paying attention to the top teams. So the last 2 weeks of previews, both the Big Ten and the SEC, is where the majority of the big dogs are. So really excited to dive into this one. Daniel, we kind of had the SEC versus Big Ten conversation on last week's episode, which if you didn't catch that one, go back and listen and try at the beginning. Nice little conversation about which conference is better in current state. Is there pressure on, I'll say pressure in quotation marks, like, is there pressure on the conference to actually get it done this year and win a national title? And, you know, not that each team feels the pressure for their conference to represent. No one really feels that. But, like, is there outside pressure of, like, the SEC needs to assert their dominance again and to do that, like, win the national title? Not just because they're the best conference last year, according to advanced metrics. But, like, do they need to win the national title to kind of assert back that we're the best conference again?
I think yes and no. I think if you look at it from a conference holistically, like Greg Sankey, is he feeling pressure? I think he would argue that he's always feeling pressure and that it's like, you know,
yeah,
it is what it is. He's one of the great power brokers of not just college football, college sports, but I mean, I would almost just say like just the like greater, you know, society in a way. I mean, he is such an important figure, you know, in the Southeast, and this is such an important deal for him. So I think you put yes for them. Every school in the SEC is its own pressure cooker in and of itself. So like Georgia and Florida is not going to be like, man, I really hope Georgia wins the national championship this year so that the SEC can win.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, I really hope Georgia loses to Ohio State or whoever. Same for like Alabama and Auburn. And, you know, I mean, Georgia and Alabama, I don't think Georgia fans are pulling for Alabama and vice versa. So
Right.
I think some people overthink it and think that the SEC cares about conference prestige. I think there's a certain amount of, they know that they're who they are and they know that the SEC is the best conference. And so there's a little less of like having to, you know, show to one another who, you know, they're not having to measure up. They're confident in who they are. You ask SEC fans across the board, I think they're pulling against other SEC schools. They're excited when, like, a Georgia fan would be excited if Florida lost to Northern Illinois. Like, they would be excited about that when most people in the Big Ten would say, look at the weak SEC. Georgia fans would be cheering that night, you know? And so I think you have to keep that in mind. Now, I will throw this one little caveat in, Jacob. Georgia, we're about to start with Georgia. The SEC is on the cusp of a decision either to add potentially a ninth game, to make a decision on future scheduling. They have not made that decision yet. Remember, they told us it was a 2-year thing while they're trying to figure out the 12-team playoff. I think they're still waiting for the official ruling on if this is going to expand to 16 teams, if it's going to stay at 12, what they're going to do going forward, what the format is. And at that time, and that time alone, they'll also make a decision based off of a conference, you know, games and everything. But really, the driving force behind all of this is money. They are on the cusp of a big money increase with ESPN, with potentially adding, you know, 16 more games because they'd be adding a ninth conference game if that were to be the case. But I also think that the SEC only moves as they want to move, so they're not going to be pressured to do what they're going to wait until the opportunity is right. They're not like going to fall to like, you know, what the outside pressures may be from the Big 10 or the Big 12 or ACC or another, you know, team saying, oh, well, they don't have strength of schedule. It's like they're fine. But I mean, that's a long-winded answer for what you're asking. Like, if a Big 10 won for the third year in a row, I think that the SEC fans as a whole would be like, oh, that stinks. But they're going to be like, that stinks. I wish my team won. And I don't think anybody's going to think any less of it because especially like Greg Sankey and all of the people who are dealing with any of the money, they're going to look at the ratings and the ratings are going to go nowhere. They're going to continue to go up. So they're not worried. The product is the product. And Jacob, this conference is deep. We're about to dive into it. And I mean, there's a lot of teams that are really good and can, beat a lot of other teams across the country. So this is a loaded conference.
Loaded conference. I still think it's the best conference in college football. Last year being what many called a down year for the SEC, I'd agree overall. Because a lot of times we would talk about this last week, but you judge a conference based on the top teams, and the top teams were not as elite last year. So I get it, but I think we're going to see a little bit of a change there this year. Daniel, let's start at the top. There's 3 teams tied with 9.5 wins as the win total. We're going to start with the SEC champion last year, the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia had a down year, Daniel. They also won the SEC 10-2, lost their first 2 regular season games since 2020. They go win the conference anyway with the backup quarterback that second half. They lose in the playoff to Notre Dame, who went on to play for the national championship. So, by Georgia's own standard, a disappointing end to the season. Kirby Smart, in an interview with Josh Pate, called it the best coaching job that he and his staff has done since being at Georgia. Was what he called last season. And look, he knows what's inside that locker room better than you and I or anybody else. So I'll take him at his word there. But I feel like there's not been a lot of hype around this team coming into the season. The win total 9.5. The schedule, I say the same as last year, but all those road trips Georgia took, you now get in your home stadium in Sanford Stadium. Their road games being at Tennessee, at Auburn, at Mississippi State, and look, they get to go to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think that's a much different environment than Bobby Dodd at the end of the year. That's going to be a Georgia home game in the same venue where they want to be in the SEC championship. Daniel, 9.5 wins. You going over and under for the Dogs this year?
Yeah, I think that this one, 9.5. I mean, I think it's an easy over. I'll tell you why. Of course, I think that offensively, people start with the quarterback. Obviously, Gunnar Stockton had those, game and a half, I guess just a game and a half exactly from last year. Started the whole game for the playoff game against Notre Dame, obviously famous, taking over at halftime in the SEC championship. I was going through this exercise earlier. Gunnar Stockton has only really played against really good teams. If you put into a microcosm, he played obviously that great Notre Dame team that went to the national championship game and had just studs all over their defense, front seven, secondary, guys that were drafted, cornerbacks, everything like that. Game before that, obviously Texas, very stingy defense, SEC championship. He's playing in those high pressure situations. The last game he had played in was in the Orange Bowl the year before against Florida State, who's a 13-0 team. And say what you will, I mean, that they maybe had a pulse when he came in, but they had been beaten down. But that's still, you think, quality of opponent. That wasn't like a, UT Martin or something like that. They're still playing against high-level guys that are going to the NFL. So I wanted to just point that out. Like, he has not had tune-up games so far in his career. This year, he's going to get that. The first 2 games, he's going to have Marshall, and he's going to have Austin Peay. So having those couple of games to just get, it's probably going to be vanilla. It's probably not going to be anything fantastic as far as running these great plays. They're probably going to put a couple things on tape for Tennessee to see. But I think that you're going to see them just try to be on time and, move the ball down the field and be efficient and, procedural. Let's break the huddle the right way and let's line up correctly and let's not have many penalties. Let's not turn the ball over and just do the simple things really well. So that is what I see for this offense. You've got transfers. Zachariah Branch is highly touted. Obviously, Noah Thomas coming in from Texas A&M. They're hearing a lot about him. He's very tall, but he's also can get some separation. So Colby Young comes back. He only played briefly last year for Georgia, and he caught, I think, a couple touchdown passes, but he's a big red zone target. So really some much needed, changeover at that wide receiver position that Georgia really struggled with last year. And, how often is it that you have 4 guys go to the NFL draft on the offensive line, but somehow you have 4 returning starters? That doesn't quite make sense to me, Jacob, but Kirby and Stacey Searles are very adamant about having guys rotate in. Obviously, there was a need with several injuries last year, but they feel good about that offensive line. There's only going to be one guy that's kind of unproven, and that's going to be right guard. That battle is up in camp right now. So I feel good about their offense. Running back Nate Frazier, they've got solid group there. Defensively, they bring in some transfers at the edge rusher position and some secondary guys. But I think this may be the best group of cornerbacks in the conference. And I think they're 4 deep at corner, and it's led by Dalen Everett, who I think is going to be a potential first-round pick this year, definitely in that first and second-round range, in my opinion. So they're really solid there, great with special teams. This is a very good team. So the 9.5 for me, I think Georgia loses a game this year. I don't think they're going to go undefeated in the regular season. If I'm looking at it, they go to Tennessee, they go to Auburn. Those are tough road games. Georgia has just dominated both of those teams recently. So it's kind of like, what do you expect? But Auburn has given Georgia tough games when they go to Jordan-Hare. So that one I'm kind of, coin flip on. Obviously, Georgia doesn't beat Alabama regularly. They play them this year. It is in Athens for the first time in Kirby Smart's tenure. So I think that's a big deal. But Texas is on the schedule. And even though Georgia beat them twice last year, I mean, those are tough games. Texas is a very good team. We'll get to them in a second. They got Ole Miss on the schedule. So I think with all of those, Florida with DJ Lagway, I think they're going to lose one of those games. I'm not going to say exactly which one right now, but they're going to go 11-1. 10-2 gets me over. That's easy. 11-1 for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I'm over as well, Daniel. This is going to sound very elementary, but my question for Georgia is, what do we get out of the quarterback position? I think I go 2 ways with this. Like Gunnar Stockton, unproven, but also 4th year in the system. So this isn't a true freshman quarterback who came in January and, 8 months in is getting thrown into the fire against, a big team in week 1. This is a 4th year quarterback who's waited his turn, was very highly recruited coming out of high school, was a 5-star coming into Georgia, and has kind of waited his turn. So what do we get out of Gunnar Stockton? And here's the thing. I'm picking over knowing that, look, I'm not sold on Gunnar Stockton. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sold on it. That being said, like Ryan Puglisi's having a really good camp. This is Gunnar Stockton's team. But let's say Georgia goes into Tennessee and loses. You have a bye week before Alabama. Maybe it's a different quarterback playing against Alabama by that game in game 4 for Georgia. I think regardless, though, here's why I believe in this team. One, Daniel, everyone's talked about the offense taking a step back last year. And you and I were talking about before we started recording, like Georgia's defense actually took a bigger step back compared to Georgia. Its biggest step back since 2017. Worst defense since 2017 for Kirby Smart compared to the rest of the country and compared to Georgia, as far as like where they ranked in advanced metrics as a defensive unit. And when you're a Georgia team that, kind of builds your game plan counting on a defense that is going to hold your opponent to under 20 points a game, and now your offense is forced to go and score points. Well, now the offensive issues are going to be more glaring because the defense didn't have your back last year in every game. So the defense got a little bit worse last year. The offense wasn't clicking. Beck had a lot of interception issues, but Georgia also led the country in drops. And so 2 things, Daniel. One, I think that this is going to be the most diverse receiver room, or I'll say offensive tools, that Kirby Smart's had at Georgia since he got here. They got Zachariah Branch out of the portal. They got Noah Thomas out of the portal. You got Colby Young out of the portal last year. You can actually use Dylan Bell as a utility player. You've got your best crop of freshman wide receivers that Kirby's recruited at Georgia now coming in. You have the best tight end room in the country. Offensive line, Georgia has recruited like the best offensive line over the last 3 seasons. So like the room's loaded. You lost 4 starters, but the room's loaded. Like you mentioned, you got a lot of guys that played, and I think the defense takes a giant step forward. Mm-hmm. I think this is the best linebacker room in the country. I think it's the best secondary room in the conference. And so if you're looking at me and saying that Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo said if they do anything this season, it's going to be run the ball, that the defense is going to take a step forward and Georgia's going to run the ball better than last year, then yeah, I'm going over 9.5. This is a team that didn't lose a regular season game for 3 seasons. I know the schedule's a lot tougher, but I don't see them losing 3 games this season because I think they're going to take a step forward and the schedule is easier. Mm-hmm. So I get to 10.5 wins when I count it. So that's a full game over. Give me the over on Georgia this year. Let's go to, and by the way, uniforms. I think they have the 3rd best uniforms in the conference. Some really good ones here in the SEC, and I think they'll be playing in Atlanta for the SEC championship. Let's go to the Alabama Crimson Tide, year 2 of Kalen DeBoer. They beat Georgia at home last year in one of the most exciting games of the season. They go and lose on the road to Vanderbilt the next week. They really lost a couple of games they shouldn't last year with Vanderbilt and Oklahoma that kept them out of the playoff. Daniel, they bring a lot back This is a team that ranks 29th in returning production. And yeah, I think people need to remember this is also a team that has, on average, the best talent in the SEC because these are Saban recruited players. And Kalen DeBoer is recruiting just fine himself as well. But when a team like Alabama is 29th in returning production, that's huge and should scare the rest of college football. Their win total 9.5. I'm tied with Georgia and Texas for best in the SEC. How do you feel about the Tide this year?
Yeah, you mentioned the talent, the returning production, everything like that. I mean, they're number one in blue chip ratio. So they're 89% of the roster is 4 or 5 stars. That's big. You know, people want to, as far as Kalen DeBoer, his big criticism was, like you said, going to be about roster retention, construction, you know, as far as recruitment and everything like that. Obviously, a lot of these guys are Saban guys because it's only been 1 year of him so far. But so far, so good. Looks like they're tracking the right way as far as continuing that process because you're not number one in the country if your head coach can't recruit. So even though most of the groundwork was laid by Saban, that's still a very big deal. Yeah, famously, I mean, Ryan Williams is going to be 18 years old this year. So I think he's going to be a phenomenal wide receiver. Ty Simpson coming in, a lot of people are ready to be like, we're going to count Alabama out because we don't know anything about the quarterback. Well, I mean, he's a 5-star quarterback who sat for a couple of years. So maybe, give benefit of the doubt that he's been developing and, growing and all this kind of stuff. They've got talent everywhere, specifically defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to be very tough. Kane Womack back as defensive coordinator, and he's just got a lot of guys he can use. LT Overton is finally going to be a starter this year. People forget that he reclassified, and so he came in a year early to college, and being a defensive lineman, I think that's just tough to do in the SEC. And he went to A&M, transferred to Alabama, and kind of get his legs under him. He was a number 1 overall recruit. Well, Jacob, he's been kind of buying his time, and now he's a senior, and so really that would be a junior if he was classified like he was originally. So I'm expecting a big year out of LT Overton at the defensive end position. I think that you look overall at bringing in Ryan Grubbs. I did want to mention him. Ryan Grubb was originally offensive coordinator, was originally part of the plan when Kalen DeBoer came to Alabama last year. He stayed in Seattle as Seattle's offensive coordinator for a year rather than coming down like originally planned. And I don't necessarily think that like the Kalen DeBoer can't coach without him or anything like that. I just think you're hitting on all cylinders when those two guys are working together. I thought you saw kind of them trying to fit two things together with, the offensive personnel that they had last year with Kalen's system. Now you've got his guy in there as offensive coordinator and, year 2 for a lot of these guys in the system. So I feel good about them taking a step forward. They've got LSU at home this year. Got Tennessee at home. They do have to go to Georgia. They play at Florida State to start the year, and say what you will. I mean, that's not going to be just a cakewalk. They are a 13-point favorite as of right now. At South Carolina, Jacob, Alabama got. I would say that Alabama fans feel lucky that they got out of that game with a win last year, and it was at home. Lenore Sellers, we're going to talk about him in a few minutes, but that's a tough game. I'm over on Alabama as well. It's 9.5. I think they win 10 games at least. I think they could very well go 11-1, but I have them at 10-2, and so I'm gonna keep it at that. Go over with Alabama. I like what I see. And I think they're going to be a playoff team.
I'm also over on Alabama. Big believer in this team. Similar to Georgia, you have unproven quarterback talent, but you also have veteran guys in the room who were highly recruited. It looks like Ty Simpson. He was a former 5-star coming in. The addition of Ryan Grubb, I think, is huge. I think this is the first Alabama team you see that looks more like a Kalen DeBoer team. And by that, I mean, I think you're going to see more of his offense you saw at Washington. I think that you've got the talent to continue to be a big defensive brand like Alabama has been. Again, the talent is there for this to be an elite team. I think so with Alabama, I get to 9.8 wins. So I am over in the 9.5. I also think it's like a 10-2 team. The schedule is really tough. And I think as a college football fan, you need to recalibrate. 10-2 is the new 11-1. So that's the level of team I think this is. I think this is a playoff team as well. I do have them missing out on Atlanta just with the way the conference standings fall. but hosting a playoff game in the playoff at 10-2. I do think the defense can be the strength of this team. They do have a lot of offensive weapons. I'm curious to see how the running game looks. Last year, they had a running quarterback and weren't able to run the ball. And this year, they're probably not going to have, they will for sure not have as mobile as a quarterback as Jalen Milroe. And what does the running game look like? Does this actually open up the running game to do what Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer want to do in the running game and not trying to use Jalen Milroe? What does that look like this year is one of my questions. I think they're probably the best offensive line in the country, Daniel, this year. Or one of. And so that will be the strength of this team. The defensive line looks really good. The secondary is a question mark for me as far as if there's going to be a weakness on defense. Is it that secondary? Their schedule tougher this year than last year. Daniel, they also face, this is according to our friend Kelly Ford, the number one ranked strength of schedule as far as defenses they will face this season. So their offense will be going up against the toughest strength of schedule as far as the defenses they will face, if that makes sense, in the country this year. So offense is going to have to click, but you got a head coach and reunited with his OC where I think it's going to. I think this is a 10-2 team. Give me the over for the Crimson Tide. I think this is a playoff team this year and really excited to watch them and very confident in the over. I think this is a team that gets back to form for Alabama. And not that there's any real questions about DeBoer at Bama, but 9-3 in the first season, there's some insane fans who are used to Saban's level of success that are going to question, like, can he coach in the SEC? I think he puts a very clear stamp that he absolutely can coach in the SEC this year with a 10-2 record. Daniel, let's go to a team that made it the farthest out of SEC teams last year. They made it to the semifinals, the Texas Longhorns. They have the best conference standing record in year one. They lose that game to Georgia in overtime, but they were right there. But Texas comes in and shows they belong in this conference. They're now favored to win the conference this year. The coaches poll just came out. Number one team in the country in the coaches poll. I imagine number one in the AP poll. I'll say spoiler alert, we're bringing back our extra point rankings. They're number one on our extra point rankings.
I was going to say, tell them about the XPR. Tell them.
This is a consensus number one team going into the season. Their win total set at 9.5. I want to pause real quick. Alabama's uniforms, 5th best in conference. I think they're very good. I like some other teams better, but classic, elite, like top 6 in the SEC to me are all elite. Like argue for best uniforms in the conference, elite. 9.5 win total. Daniel, the schedule will be more difficult this year. Of course, they open on the road at Ohio State. They make a return trip to Georgia after getting them at home last year. You're going to make a trip to Florida early in the year. Daniel, is this all hype? Is Arch Manning just a name? 9.5 win total, consensus number one team. We've taken Texas off of the Who's Back episode because we think they are back. You going over under on the Longhorns?
Yeah, so this is, great stuff here. I think, first of all, 5th in the SEC for Alabama. As far as the uniforms go, this is the best uniform conference. So, calibrate accordingly. Like the top 10 are all great. So that being said, all right, Texas. Jacob, my biggest concern, I've got 2 big concerns for them. Number 1 is the defensive line, which they have answered. No, before the season, but they have brought in some transfers that in Hero Kanu from Ohio State and bringing in Travis Shaw from North Carolina, along with guys that they've recruited. I think that secondary and linebacker, I feel good about returning starters, everything like that. But you bring in those guys, I think it's going to really make all 3 levels of the defense strong. Texas is used to having really good defensive linemen, and they just have some unproven guys this year. So bringing in those transfers, I think in that middle of the defensive line is going to really make some things happen. Offensive line is similar to what Georgia went through last year, where they lose some guys to the NFL, but really they played a lot of guys because of injuries. So I feel good about the offensive line, even though technically they're returning 1 starter from the majority of the games last year. They had 3 or 4 guys that all got multiple starts at every position. So I feel good that, they're going to be able to go forward. Arch Manning. All right. Everybody's been waiting for this. This is his time. People have been pushing Quinn Ewers out since he got there, and Quinn Ewers was famously like one of the greatest recruits of all time. So the fact that Arch Manning has had to wait behind anybody is amazing. He's here now. We'll get a full view of him throughout the whole season and not just in reserve duty or against Mississippi State or something where it feels like, It's a watered down version of what we're going to get. We're going to get full Arch. He's in his junior year now. He's in the Sark system. He should know everything at this point. So I'm very excited about that. Losing the second question I have for this team is receiver. Losing Matthew Golden from last year. I'll throw in Isaiah Bond, but really Matthew Golden. That's really it's just he meant so much, and I think that kind of goes without saying. And Hunter Helmet, tight end as well. So you lose a couple pass catchers, and I really hope that Arch can get in with some of these guys and really build rapport. That's going to be my biggest question. They start the year at Ohio State. I mean, that's heavyweight matchup of heavyweight matchups. The best of the SEC versus the best of the Big Ten, at least to projection for this year. So I love it. You go through the rest of the schedule though, and they do the right thing as far as that out of conference. Yeah, you got your big marquee matchup, but let's go ahead and throw in a San Jose State, a UTEP, and a Sam Houston State, all local, all at home. They're all at home. And then they go to Florida. Florida is going to be a tough game on the road. I'm excited to see that game. Obviously, you've got the Red River rivalry, Red River shootout against Oklahoma, and then at Kentucky, at Mississippi State. If you could pick two teams to have to go to this year, that's probably the two teams you want to. Then they come home and play Vanderbilt. So what a stretch there for Texas, mirroring what they did last year. Then they do have to go on the road to Georgia. But if we're talking about 9.5, I don't think there is a chance that they win 9 games or less. Not a chance this year. They are 10-2, and I'm slamming the over. I think they're 11-1. I have them at 11-1. I'll be as far as my prediction, they are 11-1 is my expectation, but 10-2 is the absolute floor for this team with this schedule, and that includes at Ohio State, at Florida, and at Georgia. So they'd have to lose all 3 of those for them to. They're not going to lose all 3 of those. They're going to beat one of those teams at a minimum. So give me the over for Texas. I think they're going to have a good year. Excited to see this one.
I get to 10 wins exactly, 10.0 on the schedule. So another comfortable over for me. Bill Connelly talked about this in his SEC preview. Texas, like Georgia, is a team that has a ridiculously high floor. And this is why, even with the strength of schedule, I almost scoff at 9.5 for both of these teams because I'm with you. I see the floor is 10-2 for both of these teams, despite the schedule. Texas and Georgia only lost to top 10 SP Plus teams, and they avoided, and this is he talked about the ceiling versus floor teams. Alabama, Ole Miss had a higher ceiling last year as far as when they peaked, but they were also capable of losing to Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Kentucky at home. Texas and Georgia are not capable of losing to those teams. They grind out wins they're supposed to. They only lost to good teams. I think that Steve Sarkisian, this is year 5 for Steve Sarkisian. They've recruited in the top 3 consistently under him. This is finally Texas reaching their potential. Yeah, I'm comfortably over. This is a team that, which I will talk more about. This is a playoff team. I think they're right back in the conference championship game against Georgia. I think that Arch Manning is not overrated. I think we're going to be talking about him all season because I think he's going to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. I think he'll be a finalist there. This is Steve Sarkisian, I think, for my money, is the best play caller in the country and best offensive play designer in the country. So him having the tools he has is just unfair for the rest of college football. They probably got the best quarterback in the conference, best running back room in the conference, a top 3 receiver tight end room in the conference. My question for Texas is offensive line. Can they give Arch enough time to be successful or to run the ball this year? So if I have a question on offense for Texas, it's offensive line. On defense, they look loaded at all 3 levels. You could argue they have the best secondary in the conference, but defensive line should be very good. Linebacker core should be very good. This is just going to be a very good team, Daniel, that I think has a ridiculously high floor like Georgia. Yeah, I'm very comfortable on the over with Texas. I think it'll be Texas and Georgia again in the SEC championship, just given the way conference standings are going to go. Very comfortable on the over. Which you and I both over on all 3 teams at 9.5 and all playoff teams. So yeah, I'm very comfortable on this, even with the tougher schedule. Give me the over for the Longhorns. This could be, they've played in the semifinal game 2 years in a row. This to me is a team of did they break through and win their first national title in 20 years? That's the kind of conversation we need to start having about Texas. I think it's not only not crazy, I think it's right to have them as the best team in the country heading into this season, and totally see why that is. And here's the thing again, with the high floor like Georgia's conversation, they lost 12 guys to the draft last year. I think that was a school record. And we're talking about them as a consensus number one team. Again, that's Kirby Smart and Georgia territory is what we're starting to talk about with Texas. Sark has really unlocked Texas's potential and raising the floor and ceiling of that program, and fully expect them to be in the national title conversation all year this year. Let's get down to 8.5 wins, Daniel. Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. Look, underachieved, you could say, the last 2 seasons. Wasted a Heisman season with Jaden Daniels. They win the SEC West in year 1, kind of been quiet since. Some people have said, hey, are they, should Brian Kelly be on the hot seat? It's LSU. Expectations are high. The win total is 8.5. Is this playoff or firing for Brian Kelly? How do you feel about the Tigers this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think the normal SEC pressure cooker says yes, playoff or fire. It's a 12-team playoff. It's not a 4-team playoff. I think that he needs to be in. That being said, I think that there's just too much money on the table for them to actually fire him because that 10-year deal. This is even greater than the Jimbo deal at Texas A&M, but it is the SEC, and they love to fire coaches and pay them a lot of money to do so. So there's that. All that to be said, I don't think that's going to be a problem because I actually think really highly of LSU. Of the top 6 SEC teams this year, they are the only one that returns their starting quarterback. They have become a media darling in the SEC media days, and as people are making their rounds to pick them as the hot team to pick to win the SEC, I don't completely disagree. I think that outside of the big 3, this is the one that has the best chance, and the reason is they're sitting here with the next highest odds for win total, so that makes sense. Aaron Anderson, number 1, the wide receiver. I think that people kind of don't think about him a whole lot when you think about, those LSU great wide receivers of years past and things like that. He's not as electric as, your Jamar Chases, Justin Jeffersons of the world, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. You can go on and on. He's not those guys necessarily, but he's extremely efficient, and he has sure hands, and he's a guy that you look for on 3rd and 4th down. Garrett Nussmeier looked for him repeatedly on those big downs when they needed it. So look for Aaron Anderson to have a big year at receiver. They bring in transfer from Kentucky, Barian Brown at receiver as well. So I'm expecting, that to continue. It is a little bit of a rebuild on the offensive line. There's some guys that have played, but they're all playing new positions because, you've had a couple, your bookend tackles both went pro. You had some interior guys go pro. So they're going to have to work that out. Garrett Nussmeier is clutch. I think that anytime you have a quarterback that has played in this conference, you start to have confidence that you're going to be able to win some of these games. I will say, I think that there is an immense amount of pressure on Brian Kelly to win week 1. Because he has dropped all of his week 1 so far at LSU. And I think that that's going to be a problem if he loses this game. From a noise perspective, if they win, I think it completely erases that narrative and they can go do their thing. Looking at it, Clemson to start the year, I think that's the marquee matchup. People are going to point to Texas and Ohio State. I mean, I might be dialed more into LSU Clemson because it's more intriguing to me. But and that's at night, and it's the battle for who's going to actually have Death Valley as their stadium's name. So, but this schedule is tough. So I see 8.5. I think that's a good number for them. They've got Florida earlier in the year than they normally do, week 3, but they get them at home. They're at Ole Miss. They have South Carolina on the schedule. They were lucky to get out of that game last year with a win, but they get them at home this year. I think that one's going to be a night game. They got Texas A&M at home, at Alabama, at Oklahoma to end the year. 8.5. I'm high on LSU. I'm going to go over. I think that they make the playoff this year. I think they're a 10-2 type team.
Wow. Okay.
But 3 gets me over, so I'm very comfortable with them being a 9-3 team. But yeah, give me the over for the LSU Tigers.
I get to 8.8 wins with this team. I think they finished 4th in the conference standings. Yeah, I'm high on LSU. I think the schedule's tough, as it always is. Opening up at Clemson's going to be a very tough game because I'm very high in Clemson. I think that's going to be an unbelievable game in week 1 at night at Clemson. Thank God they're playing this as a home and home. And
for sure.
not in Atlanta or somewhere else. Yeah, I mean, you could argue they had the best returning quarterback in the conference this year with Nussmeier. They have consistently a top 5 recruiting advantage. They did bring in the number 1 ranked transfer class this year. And does the defense get fixed? Like, the offense was good last year. Like a top 10 offense last year. How good does the defense get? Because if you pair a top 10 offense, obviously, with a top 20 defense, this becomes one of the best teams in the country. Where, Daniel, I'll ask you this. Like, I'm over on LSU. How many teams do you think can realistically win the conference this year? Like, where do you draw the line? Like, I think from what we've talked for so far, like the top 3, obviously. Where's that line of teams that you would not be shocked, like this team can actually win the conference this year?
I think that so LSU is the last of those teams that I would say I would not be shocked.
Same.
But
That's where I'm at.
I'll also say I do think Texas A&M has a ceiling in them somewhere. I think they're capable, but I would be shocked if they achieved their full potential. So that's not to throw shade, but I would not be shocked I've seen LSU achieve their full potential. I've seen, Alabama, yada, yada. But A&M, I'm kind of, that's a team that I'm like, dude, if they just put it all together, they're 82% on the blue chip ratio. They've got guys everywhere. So people forget about them. But yeah, I'd say if not these top 4, I'll maybe add that 5th team.
Okay. Yeah. This is where I draw the line. Is I think LSU is capable of winning the conference. I don't think they do this year, but would not surprise me at all if their ceiling is winning a conference and national title.
Jacob, if I told you that Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins were healthy for the whole year, does that do anything for you? Do you think that means that their defense will be top 40? Because both of those guys are stellar NFL type players, but they both have had injury issues past couple of years. They're both projected to be back.
Injury issues, usage issues. I need to see the Harold Perkins of 2023 is what I need to
Which
see.
they're saying that's what they're doing. They've moved him to a position where he's going to be purely pass rushing. So I don't know if that's, they tried to turn him to an off-ball linebacker last year, but he can get after the quarterback, so just let him.
Ole Miss, Daniel, their win total also at 8.5 in this group of 3 teams with 8.5 win total. I feel like a big missed opportunity last year with this Ole Miss team. They finished, Daniel, 2nd in SP Plus. Again, this ceiling versus floor conversation of that Ole Miss team had a ceiling of a national championship team, which I did not think going into the season, especially because defensively, man, you think about Lane Kiffin, you think about offense, but this is a top 5 defense in the country last year. The floor was low too, like they lose to Kentucky at home. They lose to Florida on the road when they're in prime position to make Atlanta and make the playoff. Their win total still at 8.5, so Vegas not expecting a huge drop-off in production from Ole Miss. How do you feel about the Rebels this year?
Yeah, it's tough. They're going to lose. They lose a lot. A lot of people are going to point to, hey, Austin Simmons at quarterback played a little bit, looked good when he played. Is he going to be formidable to take over for Jackson Dart? I do think that they're not going to really miss a lot at quarterback because I like Austin Simmons a lot. Fun fact, he graduated high school at like 16 or 17, I guess 16 years old, because he's a third-year guy and he's just, he's 19 now. So, he was a homeschool player actually, and so people didn't really know about him until like late. So that's pretty cool. But he came in that Georgia game last year, Jacob, and he really, ignited this team after, Jackson Dart went down with an ankle injury. And then of course Dart comes back in and finishes the game. But, he led them down there for their first score and really set the tone for this game. I think he's got that ability to do that in any game, but the facts are they lost a lot of guys on offense and defense. So it's not going to be just a, one quick fix. Can he play? Like, I think he's going to be probably someone they really depend on this year. And it's, if he was coming into a team that was more senior laden or had a bunch of guys that could he just had to rise to their level. That's one thing, but this is like, he has to kind of be the guy to lead them. And he hasn't led yet. So I do believe in Austin Simmons. I like this team I actually like this team a lot next year, not this year. But that being said, I'm right there at this line. I'm going to lean under because of the schedule. I'm going to go 8-4 for this team. They've got LSU at home. They do play Tulane this year, and then they go at Georgia, at Oklahoma. They have South Carolina at home, Florida at home. I just think that there's going to be a few losses that kind of you scratch your head with because of a young team. I think, obviously, the world of Lane Kiffin and what he's already done at Ole Miss, this 3-year run that they've been on, is unprecedented in Ole Miss history. So, they're going to be good. I just think that this is a year that they maybe don't quite live up to what they've done recently, and maybe they cycle back into that next year. But this year is kind of a little bit of a lull. Bottom's not going to fall out. They're not going to be a bad team. I have them at 8-4. Give me a slight under.
Daniel, with Ole Miss, I get to, I'm pulling it up here, 9 wins exactly, 9.0. So I'm over with Ole Miss, big believer in Austin Simmons. I just think Lane's proven that he has raised the floor of what we can expect from Ole Miss and reload. He's made transfers work. They do have the second worst returning production in conference, only Georgia being worse. But the way they've recruited isn't better. The way they bring in transfers is really good. This is a team, Daniel, that I still think can have a top 20 offense. Of course, last year they finished with the second best offense in the country, or top 10 according to SC Plus, and a top 3 defense. How good can the defense be this year? That's the question. Can they keep a top 10 defense? Can they keep a top 15 defense? Because if so, that's what's going to keep you in games in this league. As far as the schedule goes, of the top 6 teams in the SEC, which I'm including Ole Miss in, they only play 2 of those teams. And they are, one is at home and one is on the road. So they go to Georgia, they get LSU at home early. I think it's going to be a fun team again. And I think that this is a team that finishes, I think I have them 5th in the conference standings. Yeah, 5th. So I don't think, I say Ole Miss doesn't skip a beat. It's funny that they went 9-3 last year. I think they go 9-3 this year, and it looks more impressive because, after last year, it's almost like a reloading year, where last year's 9-3 is disappointing. I think this year's 9-3 is impressive. And this is a team that I think is fighting for a playoff spot here at the end, where this will be I think a top 12 team at the end of the year. That does not mean you get a playoff spot with the way our rules are currently, but fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the year for Ole Miss. I'm over on the Rebels. We make it to the Tennessee Volunteers, Daniel. Look, as a college football fan, good on Josh Heupel, what he did with Nico. Their one total at 8.5. Has Vegas adjusted? Does this need to be lower? Is it right where it needs to be? With losing your starting quarterback at the end of spring, 8.5 for a team that, has been very good the last 2 years. And I'll say I was wrong about Josh Heupel. Thought he wouldn't make it to this point in his Tennessee tenure. But here he is, 8.5 win total. Is a Tennessee team that went to the playoff last year. Probably should have gone 2 years ago. They've been, in 2022. They've been very consistent. Again, Josh Heupel's raised the floor of this program. 8.5 over under on the Vols in 2025.
Yeah, this one's tough because obviously the Nico's going to get all the headlines with how all of that went down. Jacob, I don't think that defensively they've got 7 returning starters back. They've got their defensive coordinator back. Boo Carter in camp. He's practicing. Okay, all the reports he's there. Okay, that to be said, I think defensively they're still going to be very good. They do lose James Pierce, and he was an animal as far as getting after the quarterback. We hope that continues because we're Falcons fans, so we want him to continue to do that. But as far as what they're going to be missing, I think that they're going to be able to replace his production at defensive end, and they've got a good defense. So, all right, one side of the ball I feel good about. The other side of the ball, we've got some problems. They're replacing a lot of the offensive line. They're obviously Nico's leaving. People just aren't talking about Dylan Sampson being gone. I mean, he's a guy.
Player of the year.
SEC Player of the Year. He's a guy that, if it wasn't 2024, if it was 2006, I feel like people would kind of put him in SEC lore almost of how good of a running back he was. He had 25 rushing touchdowns last year. I mean, he was just awesome. Really high. When you could pair a good defense with a running game that you can do your thing, that's different than what they're about to do. Now, by all accounts, I mean, Peyton Lewis could be a good running back. He's going to have to do it behind a new offensive line. He's also going to have to do it behind a new quarterback. Joey Aguilar, for all intents and purposes, played well at App State. He did turn the ball over at a pretty high clip, and that doesn't fly in the Heupel offense. So, we're going to have to see about that. But, Jacob, people aren't really talking about what's happening at receiver. Squirrel White transferred. Brew McCoy retired. You've got a lot of turnover there. Mike Matthews, this is his year to step up at receiver. Dante Thornton's gone. So you've got guys that have left. You've got to have your three guys in that Heupel system, three good starting receivers for that thing to work. I think that they're going to get it going at some point. They start the year versus Syracuse. If this was last year's Syracuse team, I would be very worried if I was Tennessee. This year, I think that they're going to be able to kind of keep that one close, and then, hopefully they make enough plays for their sake to win that game in the end. It is a neutral site game in Atlanta. Then they play East Tennessee State, and then they play Georgia. So Georgia is their first SEC game. It is at home. That game's not gone Tennessee's way for 8 years now. It's tough to see if that would happen this year as well. Then they play UAB at home, at Mississippi State, which if they had Nico, I'd feel good about. But this case, they're going on the road in the SEC. You have to start taking all of these things into account. I know it's Mississippi State. I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
Them against Mississippi State.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful. This is not that part of this. I'm just saying what would be kind of an afterthought. You'd be like, okay, yeah, they might stub their toe and struggle a little bit, but ultimately they'll win. You have to consider now. Mississippi State does stink. We'll get there. At Alabama, they don't. They win those games in Knoxville. They don't win those games in Tuscaloosa. And then, at Florida. So I don't want to be out on the Vols. I think that if they had Nico back, then he could uplift, he could overcome the offensive line and the running back situation, the receiver situation. But when it's all of it on offense, I like their defense to keep them in games, but I'm going to lean under. Was theirs 8.5 as well?
8.5, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think 8-4 is bad. I mean, as far as for this team, I see them in the 7-5, 8-4 range. I probably lean more 8-4 because Heupel, I think he does raise the floor considerably for this team. So give me Tennessee slightly under that 8.5 wins.
I'm with you on the under. I think losing your starting quarterback, SEC Player of the Year, and NFL caliber offensive line sets you up for not as much success this year. So I'm on the under. I don't think the win total's caught up to just how much Tennessee lost. And please hear me on this comparison. I'm not comparing them to Clemson or to Trevor Lawrence. But if you remember when Clemson lost Trevor Lawrence, everyone was talking. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like everyone was talking about Trevor being gone, and like what that meant for like Clemson and stuff like that. And you and I talked about it's not just Trevor Lawrence, it's losing the ACC's all-time leading rusher, ETN, and their offensive line, which wasn't very good to begin with. I think that's kind of the same vibes around Tennessee. Is it's not just losing Nico. I thought Josh Pace said this really well. Tennessee was probably going to take a step back anyway. And Josh Heupel probably brought a lot of equity with Tennessee fans by planting the flag with the Nico situation. And this is going to be an 8-4 that Tennessee fans are okay with and proud of, is kind of how I see this team, because you planted the flag, you're fine with the result. The defense I still think is going to be really good, like a top 20 on defense. They return a bunch on this defense, even though you lose James Pierce. And schedule-wise, they also draw the bottom 4 teams in the SEC. So that's why I think the win total probably stayed as high as it is the schedule draw, but I think you're slightly under. I think it's like an 8-4 team. I'm on the under with you as well. All right, here's some of the messy middle in the SEC. We'll start with Auburn. Hugh Freeze, 7.5 the win total. Bringing in Jackson Arnold. Is he fixed? We're going to find out. How do you feel about the Tigers in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, this team, they were so turnover prone last year that even though they had overall a good team, it felt like at times they just couldn't get out of their own way. Cam Coleman, just one of the bright spots for sure last year. He's the type of receiver that can separate. He can go up over people. He's a big-bodied receiver. I'm really high on the receiving core. They bring in Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, who is at a time the number one player in all of the transfer portal. Definitely a big playmaker from Georgia Tech. They wanted to keep him, but he got offers from every major school in the country, and he chose Auburn. And I think that, you pair that receiving core with Jackson Arnold. I mean, let's call it what it was last year, man. It wasn't good, but they had 5 receivers hurt, and there's only so much you can do. He wasn't getting, you can make all the excuses you want. It's just not everything was working to his advantage. I mean, he comes into a situation where he's got 4 guys that are back on the offensive line, so they feel good about where they are offensive line. They brought in a couple transfers at offensive tackle that they feel really good about, that are actually upgrades to their team. And then you got the receiving core, and then, losing Jarquez Hunter at running back, that's going to be a big deal. But, I think that they're going to have a committee of guys. They've got some pass catching backs. They've got some guys that can run this Hugh Freeze style system and run it well. And I'm confident that, their blue chip ratio, 64%, that is important to mention in the sense that people forget that Auburn's talented just because they've had several down years, and especially last year with all the turnovers. I think they can kind of fix that this year. So I'm high on Auburn in that vein. We're at 7.5 for them. I have them at 8-4 this year. So they start the year at Baylor. They play at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M. They play Georgia at home. At Arkansas is not just a pushover. And then, of course, they finish the year with Alabama at home. I think they're going to be a tough place to play. I think they have a chance to beat Georgia this year when they roll in. That's, it's going to be a tough game for Georgia, that atmosphere. So give me the over slightly, 8-4 for Auburn. And I think Auburn is going to be very excited about what they have, especially offensively. I feel like that's going to really look the way they've wanted it to look under Hugh Freeze so far this, since he's been there for this is year 4, year 3 of Freeze here. So I think this is what Auburn fans what they see this year is what they've been envisioning since he got there. So he's finally got the quarterback that can kind of pull it for him.
Do they have the quarterback that can pull it? I think that's my question is, like, I want to believe in Auburn. The defense was very good last year. Like, on paper, the defense was very good last year, but this is similar to Penn State in that I need to see it. I need to see Auburn not trip up against Cal. Like, not trip up against Arkansas. You should be better than, we won't use that school. You should be better than Missouri. You should be better than Vanderbilt. Like, teams they lost to last year. It's different if I'm saying, man, Auburn came up short last year and they were 9-3 and their losses were LSU, Alabama, and Georgia. And it's like, okay, it sounds about like Auburn, right? And they cycle up and win a few of those games and go play for a national championship. But this is a far cry from that. I'm just at 7.5. You can tell me they have the best receiving core in the SEC. And I'm scared to death hearing that both in spring and fall camp, they've asked the defensive coordinators to take it easy on Jackson Arnold to help get his confidence back. That's one thing in the spring. To hear it in fall camp makes me like, I was so ready to put the over with this team, and I've just flipped it and gone to under. I just like, at Baylor in week 1 is not a guaranteed win. And then you go Ball State, South Alabama, and then at Oklahoma and at Texas A&M. Daniel, what if they're 2-3 before the bye week, before Georgia comes in? Like, they could be 5-0, but what if they're 2-3? I think that's my yeah. Then you got Georgia. What if you're 2-4? Missouri, you lost to last year. At Arkansas is all of a sudden not easy at all. Kentucky at home is, you go to Vanderbilt, who beat you last year, which again, you got Bama to end the year. I'm going to need to see it this year. I'm going to take the under. I get to 7.1 wins with Auburn, and I'll be happy if they are over this number. Like, I'd like to see Jackson Arnold get his swagger back, but it sounds like it was just a yips problem. And last season at Oklahoma, I'm sure it didn't help him with putting him back in, where he and they've said he just wasn't seeing it. Like, he wasn't there mentally. For his sake, I really hope he gets back. For college football's sake, this is a kid who won the Elite 11. He was one of the most highly sought after quarterbacks out of high school. I really hope he gets it back this year. I'm just going to need to see it first. Give me the under for Auburn. Florida Gators, number 12 on the coaches poll that just came out. Their one total set at 7.5. This is a team that at times last year, again, was capable of beating an Ole Miss, and was also capable of, we came on here and said it wasn't a matter of if, but when Napier was going to get fired. That's what I said after they lost to Miami last year in week 1, in the way they did. They turn the season around. They go 7-5, 8 wins with the bowl game. Their win total now set at 7.5. Daniel, were you on the Gators this year?
Yeah, this is, I think a lot of people caught fire with them overcoming and just them. Basically, they had very low expectations last year and they overachieved. I think that a lot of people were like, because they overachieved, they are good. And I don't think that that's necessarily wrong. That's how projections work. You know, a stat that I've heard multiple times now, you probably have too. Florida was 6-0 when DJ Lagway started games last year and finished them. So he had to start and finish the game. They were 6-0. That's impressive. I mean, you would like for your quarterback to start and finish every game, right? That, but it, you know, he had Georgia on the ropes when he was in, and he got hurt, and then that game went differently. So you had several games like that on the schedule last year. But by and large, the way they finished last year, Jacob, I mean, they lost to Texas. That was embarrassing. But beating LSU, beating Ole Miss at Florida State, and then winning the bowl game in convincing fashion, those are all big wins. So I like how they finished. There's a lot of momentum. Can DJ Lagway stay healthy? It's tough to win in the SEC when you're healthy. It's tough to stay healthy when you're 100% healthy at the beginning of the year throughout the grind of an SEC schedule. He's already had 2 instances in the preseason, one with his shoulder and one with his calf, where he's been injured. So what does that mean? Like, is he going to be able to deal with the grind of an SEC schedule? Shout out 3-year Letterman. Can he do it? A lot of my questions are around that because this offensive line is improved. Jake Slaughter may be the best center in the SEC this year. I think that they're going to have.
You could argue best offensive line in the conference.
Yeah, they've got 4 returning starters. I mean, this is a team that's going to be mean. They're going to have only 4 games outside of the state of Florida this year. So you piece that together, you know, this team should take that step. I like Jaden Ball. Saw his game last year at running back. He runs really hard. He's a violent runner. Defensively, do they have enough? I'm going to say they've got at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at A&M, the Georgia game. They do play at Ole Miss. I think Florida State's going to be better this year than they have been. There's just a lot of potential losses on this schedule, and the fact that I don't know if DJ Lagway is going to be healthy. If you could guarantee me DJ Lagway is healthy from the start to finish of the year, in my opinion, I'm slamming the over. I think that he's gonna deal with some injury. He's not going to be 100% in all of these games, and I think that's a problem for this Florida team. I'm going to go under. I think they're slightly under. I think they're a 7-win team, 7-5. So they go back to a bowl game. I don't think anybody's going to get fired this year, but I do think that it's a tough schedule and there's just a lot to deal with if your quarterback is not 100%.
Daniel, I have this team. I don't know where they are in XPR, but when I did my ranking, I have them as the 12th best team in the country, 6th best SEC team. This is a team that's going to be really good on the line of scrimmage. They've got I think one of the best quarterback talents in the country, right? Like as far as just pure talent. And he showed it last year. Like what I'll say, Lagway showed more talent last year than Anthony Richardson ever showed at Florida. How's that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Is that a stretch? As far as like they're already getting it out of him, even in his like limited time between injury, all this other stuff. Like Napier's using him, and they've got 5 stars now at receiver and tight end. They've got a veteran offensive line. Like this offense should be clicking, man. Defensively, very good defensive line. Like you've got a good linebacking core. Again, if there's a question mark on defense for me, it is the back end of that defense. It is the secondary. Like I question what they're going to do at safety, and like, can they run fit at safety? How good are their corners going up against? And here's what we're going to get to, Daniels. I'm very high in Florida. I think this is a top 15 team in the country. I also think they're going to go under the win total. For my money, this is the single toughest schedule in the country. They play, of those top 6 SEC teams, they play 5 of them. And of those games, 1, 2, 3 of them are away from home. They also go to Miami, which will be a consensus top 15 team. It's a tough schedule, man. I think it's going to be the best 7-5 team in the country. And I hope that Lagway proves me wrong and is a Heisman finalist, and I'll say this. Here's my hot take in Florida. if they win 8 games, I think they should be considered for the college football playoff. I think the schedule is that tough. Or if they win 8 games, I think Florida's 8-4 will be better than a Big 12, 11 or 10 win team. Now, it doesn't matter because they're going to get a guaranteed berth, and I'm going to get called an SEC stand for saying that. But if you just look at their schedule, and I think, again, our friend of the program, Kelly Ford, has a great metric on his website for schedule difficulty where he goes through like wins to be considered for the college football playoff, like how many games you need to win. And he has 5 teams that like need to win 8 games. No, excuse me, 8 teams that can win 8 games to be considered, and Florida's one of them. And if you look at toughest schedules in the country, the rest of the teams won't surprise you. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Vandy, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Carolina, Wisconsin, LSU. So I think at 8-4, Florida is a no doubt top 12 team in the country. I don't think they make the playoff at 8-4, but I think if you get 8-4, I think at 9-3, Florida will be in the playoff. I will get that far. I'm very confident at 9-3, Florida is in the playoff because that means you had to have beaten 2 out of LSU, Miami, Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tennessee. Like you've won 2 or 3 of those games against those teams. Anyway, I am high on Florida, and then I look at the win total and go, "Oh my gosh!" But I'm under. I went into it thinking I'm going to be over on Florida, and I get to 7.1 wins, and I'm like, "Man, I'm under." I'm under on the Gators with you on the under, the best 7-5 team in the country. Let's go to Missouri. Missouri, also 7.5. Last year, a team that I thought underachieved. I had them in the playoffs simply based on their schedule. I thought they would be a 10-2 team in the SEC. They go 9-3, which against that schedule, nowhere close to the playoff at that point. How do you feel about the Missouri Tigers this year?
Yeah, Jacob, I think that they got 2 big transfers that I think are going to be a big deal. They're at premier positions. Obviously, Bo Pribula from Penn State coming in at quarterback, and then Damon Wilson, edge rusher out of Georgia. It was surprising for him to jump in the portal, and then when he did, all the rumors were Ohio State, and then he goes to Mizzou. So Mizzou breaking out the checkbook, doing what they need to do to try to keep up with the Joneses. You know, Eli Drinkwitz, say what you will about him, but he's definitely not been scared to stand toe-to-toe with these big-time programs, these big-time coaches, and basically stare down the barrel. I think he's very confident. I think he's a good coach. That being said, it's the start of the season. I think that they're going to have a nice little runway. You got Central Arkansas, Kansas, and then Louisiana. Then they play South Carolina. We're going to talk about them in a minute. I think that's a tough game. They get UMass, then they play Alabama, at Auburn, A&M, Mississippi State, and then at Oklahoma, at Arkansas to end the year. Mizzou has been good recently, so I don't want to just put them in this category and say that these are all losable games, but this is the SEC, and road games are tough. And some of these teams that they are probably better than if it was a neutral field or at home, they have to play them on the road. And so I'm kind of baking that into this. I'm a little lower on Mizzou. I think that they're going to go under their win total. I think they're a 7-5 team, and I think that that's, by and large, it's going to be okay. I think they're going to be fine and kind of bounce back next year, but they do lose a lot offensively and defensively, or I guess mostly offensively. Defensively, they return a decent amount, but I just don't think it's going to be enough with this schedule for them to win 8 games.
I'm with you on the under on this team, and I started a few teams that I've said, like, if I'm wrong about, it'll be about one of these teams. Missouri is one of them as far as the win total goes, because I think it's the easiest schedule in the SEC. Like, the schedule draw is good enough where you blink and they're 10-2 and in the playoff, and you're like, what just happened? Like, what do you mean Missouri's in the playoff? They lose Brady Cook, who is like very good at quarterback, really impressive 2-year run. They get, this is Bo Pribula, right? This is the Penn State. Yeah. So I'm like, they get a really impressive running quarterback. As far as returning production goes, like really bad on offense, 101st, really good on defense, and you bring in someone like Damon Wilson. Daniel, when I did the math on this one, I get to 7.1 wins, even with this schedule. I just don't know what my for sure, like, this is why I should be confident in Missouri, other than the schedule. And then I look at, like, they play one of the top 6 teams in the SEC, and that one is Alabama. And I'm sitting here going like, man, but the schedule. And I'm like, Vegas also looks at schedules when they set these win totals. So I'm like, I thought for sure I was going to be over just because of their schedule. But I'm on the under here. Again, I start because I'm like, I'm on the under and they play one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. So I think if I'm going to be wrong on a team, it's going to be like Missouri is going to be one of them. But I'm on the under. We go to the South Carolina Gamecocks, who look at times last year looked like they could be a playoff team at their best. Um, they didn't lose to any. They didn't lose to any bottom rung teams. Like their loss were to Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU. Their win total set at 7.5 coming into this year. Daniel, how do you feel about the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I think with a lot of people, this is a team that they're hot on because of the Lenore Sellers. I mean, by season's end, Jacob, me and you both, we're both on, Arch Manning. We do think that he's very good. Lenore Sellers could be the best quarterback in this conference by season's end. He's a guy that people are comparing to some people that it's sometimes sacrilegious to compare to, but he's been compared to Cam Newton. He's been compared to some of these great quarterbacks that can do both, run the ball, kind of a physical freak, and then also deliver the ball in tight windows, throw the ball downfield. He's got the NFL arm. One thing with Sellers, if you look at the beginning of the year and you look at the end of the year, you see his growth last year, him being able to play through the year and just develop and be a guy that against Old Dominion looked like he was lost and scared and was like a one read guy to big third downs against Clemson with that defense bearing down on him and making, big throws, making a big run. And I just feel like he can go through his progressions now. And if you watch the games last year, he just grew up right before our eyes. Took Alabama to the wire, took LSU to the wire, should have really beat LSU based on how things went. So I think he can do that again this year. And I think that he's just going to continue to get better. Now, he is similar to like what we talked about with, like Ole Miss a little bit, where he's going to kind of have to bring some of these other guys along. Nick Harbor is back. He's a very talented receiver. He may be the fastest guy in the country by all estimation. Dylan Stewart on defensive side of the ball, edge rusher. I think he's going to be a big deal. This team is going to need to kind of find that identity and come together. I'm not sure Faison's going to be playing this year. I know that they're waiting on that ruling. He's the running back transferred in from Clemson. So I don't think that they've officially announced that yet. The whole season doesn't depend on that, but I think he'd be a big help to this team. They start the game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Virginia Tech. I think that's a great first, game to kind of test yourself and kind of get off to the running. Then they come home, play South Carolina State, Vanderbilt, at Missouri. They play Kentucky, and then at LSU. They play Alabama at home this year. And then they play at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. 7-5 is likely. I think that's their floor. I'm going over. I like them at 8 wins. I think there's a chance they win 9 games this year. Now, that would be very tough against the backdrop of this schedule. But if you catch, the right quarterback and you can ride with him, and he's a guy that can do it all. It's not just a guy that depends on he has to have great receivers or he has to have a good offensive line or he has to have a good running game. I think Lenore Sellers can kind of transcend that, and these guys can kind of go with him where he goes. I think a key to this is Mike Shula, who was on staff last year as quarterback coach, is taking over as the offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's had stops as head coach in college, but I mean, some of his best time was as offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, and he did have Cam Newton. So if he knows how to use Cam there, he led him to an MVP. Now maybe Cam led him to an MVP, but nonetheless, like this matchup, I like him coaching this player in this part of his career. So give me the over. I know that's basically just all about Lenore Sellers, but he's who you talk about with South Carolina. So give me the over for South Carolina this year.
I'm on the under. I get the 7.3 wins for South Carolina. Unlike some of the SEC teams we've talked about, like they just don't have the recruiting prowess to lose what they lost on defense and reload. They're betting on transfers in those spots. They hit the jackpot in the transfer portal last year on defense. It's always a big question mark for me if can you do it again. Like to me, there's no formula for, they were a highly rated transfer, therefore it's going to work out. on being a successful team. There's just not enough data, and we haven't seen enough success from that happening. So I'm not going to bet on that if I am like trying to figure out my win total here. So I'm slightly under. They beat some teams they shouldn't. Like they won some games where they were underdogs last year, Daniel. Like this was a top 12 defense in the country last year. I think they take a step back and probably drop out of the top 20 this year. I think offense can take a big step forward. So like where do they land like power rating wise as those average out? And I think it's probably a little bit worse than last year. But again, this is where we're talking about the depth of the SEC. I'll give Bill Conley another shout out. Like the only conference that has a better returning production this year than the SEC is the Big 12. This is going to be a very seasoned SEC this year. South Carolina could be, a top 30 team, but also, a bottom half team in the conference. Could be. Like this is a team that I could see finishing as high as 4th and as low as like 10th in the conference standings. The question mark, I lean under. I don't have a strong feeling either way. I lean under on South Carolina. Big fan of Lenore Sellers, but lean under here for me. Texas A&M, man. Mike Elko, year 2. Look, Ty Hildebrandt over at Solid Verbal has Texas A&M in the playoff. I've seen some like that. I've seen some 6-6. Their win total is 7.5. Daniel, how do you feel about the Aggies?
Yeah, I did kind of spill this a little bit earlier when you were asking who I would be shocked to win the SEC. I think this team is capable of winning the SEC. I would still be shocked if they did it. But all that to be said, I mean, this team has 82% blue chip ratio. So I think, you think about the overall roster construction, the talent. Mike Elko, I believe in him as a head coach. Colin Klein, year 2 as offensive coordinator. I really feel like, he's kind of got the quarterback he likes, with having second year of Marcel Reed. And he kind of finished the year. And I think he, played good down the stretch. I think he was kind of a one-trick pony at times. And so you've definitely got to, develop as a good passer and, be able to win those big games like when they were playing against Texas. 5 returning starters in the offensive line. I mean, I'm never going to not mention that. You've got experience there. You've got a couple of good running backs in Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens finally healthy. And I feel like you've got just guys, former number 1 running back, Reuben Owens, this guy's in year 3 now. Casey Conception coming in at receiver. They do lose Noah Thomas to Georgia. I think that's big, but Casey Conception is a guy from NC State who played a lot and he was in big games. And so I think he's going to be just fine. Defensively, they got eight starters back. And Elko with that defense and just, having a bunch of guys back and this talented of a roster, I'm high on them. It's a tough schedule. It's always going to be a tough schedule. They play at Notre Dame this year. Obviously, they play at LSU. They play South Carolina. They get Auburn at home. I'm over. I think they're a 9-win team, and I think that they could win 10 games. If they win 10 games, I agree with Solid Verbal that they're in the playoff, but I like them at 9 wins, 9-3. Give me the over. Texas A&M.
I'm going to join you on the over here, Daniel. I think the schedule sets up nice. They only played 2 of the top 6 teams in the SEC, both on the road. They've also got Notre Dame on the road. So their toughest games are on the road. But then we've talked about this, like toughest games are on the road. We'll just say for scenario's sake, that's 3 losses. Well, now all your other games that are like teams evenly matched with you, or like, this could decide your season, are all home games. Like outside of that, you go 2 Missouri and 2 Arkansas. Like you get Auburn at home, you get Florida at home, Mississippi State at home, South Carolina at home. So I think the schedule sets up nice. I think this could be a top 10 defense in the country. And Texas A&M social media has been, showing all this stuff about Marcel Reed being, but I'm not a passer and throwing passes. Here's the thing. He doesn't need to be. And I think a full offseason with the offense built around him and not playing, quarterback musical chairs for whatever reason, injury or otherwise, like they did last season. I think a full offense, knowing that you can count on the defense to go out and shut people down, have a phenomenal running game behind a good offensive line. Yeah, I'm over, Daniel. I'm not quite as high as you. I think this is more of an 8-win team, but regardless, I think it's at least an 8-win team. So I'm on the over with you.
Be fun to watch. Fun to watch.
One team at 6.5, Daniel, that is the Oklahoma Sooners. They are betting on John Mateer and their new offensive coordinator coming from Washington State to fix the offense. The defense was a top 10 unit in college football last year. In fact, according to SP Plus, this was Sorry, I'm looking. They had 17th as the defense, which I thought it was a top 10 defense in the sport last year personally, with my, ever so handy and reliable eye test. But top 20 statistically. If the offense improves, Daniel, this team can go 9-3, 10-2. Win total is 6.5, though. So maybe Vegas knows something I don't. How do you feel about the Sooners?
They beat Alabama last year. What are we talking about? This is a great team.
They did.
6-7 last year. Obviously, Venables is going to have the defense ready to go. That's his baby. The offense, you've got to have efficiency at quarterback. Bringing in Mateer, I think is exactly what they're going to get. They see that there's, this carousel of, transfer quarterbacks, and they've got to get their guy. And I think he was talented last year, had a good, season for Washington State. He comes in, and I think people were kind of forgetting about Oklahoma, and I think that's a problem. I think they're going to sneak up and beat a couple people they're not supposed to, or at least the experts are saying they're not supposed to. It's a tougher schedule. They've got Michigan on the schedule, but they, that's in Norman. They're playing Auburn. They're playing their usual matchup with Texas. At South Carolina is going to be tough. They get Ole Miss at home. I think that's big. I think that's a game that if it was at Ole Miss, I would lean Ole Miss. It's at home. I think that they could be sneaky with them, just like they were with Alabama last year. Now, they do have to go to Tennessee and to Alabama, but what's Tennessee going to be at that point? Will they have a few losses under their belt? Will this be not quite as raucous of a stadium that they go into? That's definitely going to be something to kind of keep in mind. So Alabama, I think, maybe gets their revenge on them, but I'm going to go slightly over for Oklahoma this year. I like them at 7-5.
What happens in October to Oklahoma? They get bye week, Kent State. They get Texas and Dallas. After Texas, they go to South Carolina. My thing with Oklahoma is here. I'm over. I get to 6.7 wins. I'm relying on numbers here. Mm-hmm. I get to 6.7 if I'm just doing math. And then I look at the schedule and it scares me to death.
Yeah.
This, similar to Florida, I think is the second hardest or second most difficult schedule in the country. Similar to Florida, this could be a top 15 team and they go 7-5, which is still over, by the way, at a 6.5 win total.
Yeah.
I'm keeping my stick with the numbers, go over. I really am having a hard time believing that transfer quarterback and USC can just come in and fix it. That's great that Mateer, you did this against what's essentially a Mountain West schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to come in here and your first month of the season, they're home games, but you get Michigan and Auburn. They could be 4-0. They could be 2-2. You get the bye week. You got Kent State, Texas, and Dallas. If you lose that, do you go to South Carolina and lose? Now you're reeling. You got Ole Miss at home, but you're reeling. Then you got to go to Tennessee. Bye week. Now you got Alabama. You got to go on the road after beating them last year in kind of a revenge spot. Missouri with their schedule could be, 9-1, looking at a playoff berth, hoping, they're counting on you as a win. You got LSU at the end of the year, who I think is going to be a national title playoff contender. I'm over. I just don't 7-5 to me is a great year, and 6-6 would not surprise me. Everything in me wants to go under. My numbers say otherwise. I'm going to stick to my numbers, but this is, again, a team I starred and said I'm going over, but if I'm going to be wrong about a team, it's going to be Oklahoma. They play 5 of the top 6 teams in the SEC and miss the bottom 4. They don't play any of Arkansas, Kentucky, Vandy, Mississippi State. They don't have any of those teams in the schedule. So this is a very difficult schedule, 1 or 2 in the country. I'm going over, but not a lot of – dude, this is the Oklahoma who dominated the Big 12 for 2 decades, and we're talking about can they get 6 or 7 wins based on this win total in the SEC. It was a very, very different conversation than a few years ago. I am on the over. Daniel, we got 4 teams left here with, only one, 5.5 Arkansas as far as flirting with the bowl game goes. The rest, Vegas not expecting a bowl game. Kind of rapid fire here. Arkansas, 5.5. You over or under? I know we're Sam Pittman fans on this podcast, but over or under on Arkansas?
Yeah, I'm going to go over for one player, and that's because of Taylon Green. The fact that he did not transfer out when he could have been pick of the litter. He's a very good quarterback out there, and he stayed. I think that's going to invigorate the team. I think they're going to make a bowl game, and maybe Sam Pittman does that and then retires after the year, just has a good year. He loses a senior quarterback. I think it'd be a good time for him to retire instead of getting fired. How about that?
There you go. I'm also on the over. I get to 5.7. Not a lot of confidence either way, but I get to 5.7. They do play 5 of the top 6 teams in the SEC on the schedule. Only one they miss is Georgia. Difficult schedule, which is why the win total is where it is. Kentucky at 4.5. This is crazy because a year and a half ago, we're talking about Mark Stoops taking the A&M job. There's a coup. He doesn't. Now we're talking, did he, when he goes 4-8, he might get fired. How do you feel about the Wildcats this year?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a very uninspired team to me. Anytime you bring in someone like Zach Calzada, who, yes, he's still in school. This is year 7 for Zach Calzada, famously a 2019 recruit or whatever. So he played at Texas A&M, and he's played at a few stops at this point. But he's a guy that I just, he played at Auburn, played at Incarnate Word, but they've had, Jamori Macklin's back, but they had Dane Key and Barry Brown both leave at receiver. And I think that was the bright spot of them last year offensively. There's not a lot of guys there that can play on the level with the teams on their schedule. They have a tough schedule. It is tough every year. So it is what it is. I'm under on Kentucky. I think that this is a year that, 4.5. If this was 3.5, I'm going over. I think they're at 4 wins. So, but I'm going under 4 wins for this team, 4-8 on Kentucky.
I'm also on the under for Kentucky. I get to 0.4. That's under for me. Again, not convicted either way, but I think you said it well. I'm not inspired by this team with Kentucky. Vanderbilt at 4.5.
Yeah, Diego Pavia's back, but I kind of think it's a Cinderella and the pumpkin situation. The clock may have struck midnight. He's been running his mouth a little bit, and they're just not going to sneak up on anybody this year like they snuck up on people last year. Like, Pandora's out of the box. I'm going to use all of the different things, but they play at Virginia Tech. That's a tough game. At South Carolina, that's a tough game. Georgia State's not going to be a pushover. They lost to them last year. At Alabama, LSU. I'm going to go. We're at 4.5 for this Vanderbilt team.
4.5.
Because of friend of the show, Barton Simmons, I'm going to go slightly over. 5-7. How about that? But they don't make a bowl game.
I'm over. I get to 5.5 wins when I do it. I'm a full game over. I'm comfortable on the over for Vanderbilt. I think with a team like Vandy, you can't put on paper like the grit of. I mean, look, Clark Lee and Diego Pavia are perfect for Vanderbilt. You know what I mean? Like, they need a quarterback like Diego Pavia. Also, third in returning production in the conference. So they bring back a lot off a team that went to a bowl game. I mean, they bring back everything from a team that went to a bowl game. Third in the country returning production, 7th on offense, 3rd on defense. You know what? Vandy's going to a bowl again. How's that? 6-6.
Okay.
On the over. Mississippi State, 3.5 is the win total. Jeff Lebby there. I'm looking at my my Pick 6 previews here. Shout out to Brett at Pick 6 previews on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot of red squares for Mississippi State, which is not good. You over under on this Bulldogs team?
Yeah, they get the return trip from Arizona State, so they get them at home, and it's early in the year. So I do give them a chance in that game for what it's worth. I give them a chance because hopefully for their sake, they beat Southern Miss that first week, so they're undefeated. And then they get Arizona State at home. Even though Arizona State's a better team, that home environment for Mississippi State may get them the win. I'm just trying to count wins here. I'm not going to go through the whole schedule because the whole SEC schedule is tough for them. Alcorn State, I think they should win. Northern Illinois, my cousin, Thomas Hammack, shout out. He has beaten, I don't know if he's got another one in his bag to pull off another upset. Would this be considered an upset? There's a lot of people asking. That's at home. After that, the whole SEC schedule looks like a gauntlet because it's Mississippi State. Maybe give them a chance in the Egg Bowl just for the fact that I would love for there to be a chance that they could win the Egg Bowl. I'm going to go under. Everybody's circling this team as the team they're supposed to beat this year. So I'm going under on Mississippi State.
I'm on the under as well. Nothing to inspire confidence. With this team, for me, it's a second rebuilding season. This is going to be a very competitive SEC. I'm on the under. I'm not even counting Southern Miss as like a for sure win. On the road, weirdly, but they also have a new coach, but they kind of imported the entire, conference championship contending Marshall team from last year that came with Charles Huff. So I'm not even counting that as a for sure win. They should win that game, but I don't put that as like a 90% win percentage.
Right.
So and then you got Arizona State out of conference too. I'm on the under. I get to 3.4 wins on the schedule, slightly under, but I am on the under. Daniel, next week we'll do our conference champion picks, college football playoff picks, our Heisman pick, coach of the year, national champion. What else did I have on that list? I feel like I'm missing something. A lot of national picks next week. Our XPR we're going to reveal next week. Our preseason extra point rankings, which is, we'll talk about more about it next week. What that is not just another ranking. Everybody has their ranking, but we try to make ours like the BCS. So incorporating some cold hard computers as well as some human input.
It's the best of both worlds.
Schedule.
So good.
Best of both worlds. Teams that can win the national title. Let's talk about that next week too. Like how many teams can actually win it all. And we'll do that next week. Then we'll draft some games for the season. What are the best games each week? Before we know it, Daniel, we've got actual games to talk about, watch, pick. Very exciting time. We're almost here, just a few more weeks away. We've made it to August. There's real football games this month. Be sure to stick with us here at the Extra Point Pod. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Extra Point Pod. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Karnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.